The lake glistened like a shard of glass under the morning sun, its surface unblemished except for the gentle ripple of my boat gently tethered to the dock. It had been my refuge, a retreat from the noise of life, offering tranquility and solitude, the kind of place that whispered secrets only to those who listened. But the serenity was shattered when Karen set her sights on it, the self-appointed queen of the homeowners association, wielding her clipboard like a scepter. Her first assault was a note, clipped to my mailbox with a ferocity that nearly tore the paper. "Your boat is an eyesore," it read, scribbled in ink that betrayed her agitation. Against HOA regulations, I found it almost amusing. My boat, with its weathered charm, was hardly an affront to the neighborhood's aesthetic. It nestled comfortably among the manicured lawns and pristine gardens, a relic of simpler times. Karen, with her immaculate lawn and symmetrically pruned hedges, thrived on the order. Her house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, a fortress of conformity. In contrast, my boat represented chaos, an untamed spirit she could neither understand nor control. I responded with grace, a letter of my own, penned with deliberate calm, detailing the boat's compliance with all established guidelines. I might as well have whispered into the wind. Her retaliation came swiftly. She took to patrolling the neighborhood like a hawk, eyes darting for infractions. Every morning she passed by my dock with a steely stare, as if willing the boat to disappear under her gaze. The absurdity of her campaign was almost artful a performance piece, if you will, in the theater of the suburban battleground. I watched her antics with a bemused detachment. She hurled regulations at me like arrows, each one deflected with ease. The bylaws were as familiar to me as the lake's gentle murmur. I held my ground, anchored by reason and an unwavering belief in personal freedom. There was a particular irony in Karen's crusade. She presided over the HOA Fishing Club, a group that met weekly to cast their lines into the very lake she now sought to control, a club that relied on the lake's bounty, yet turned a blind eye to the forces that threatened its access. That irony simmered beneath the surface, a silent current I could harness when the time came. For now, I embraced patience. Karen's war was not mine to escalate. I tended to my boat, its hull a testament to resilience, and let the tides of her discontent wash over me. She was a storm, all thunder and no rain, while I was the immovable rock in its midst. The neighborhood murmured in the background, whispers of discontent and amusement at Karen's relentless pursuit. I listened, absorbing the undercurrents, while maintaining the quiet dignity of my defense. The lake remained my sanctuary, the boat its herald, defying the rigid structures imposed by those who forgot the joys of untamed waters. In the quiet moments, when the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of crimson and gold, I found solace in the thought that every storm eventually meets its calm. And so, I waited, the promise of retribution, a distant echo in the stillness. Knowing that even the smallest ripple could set the world in motion, morning light filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the mahogany table where I sat, sipping my first cup of coffee. The tranquility was fragile, like the delicate surface tension on a pond, and it shivered at the sound of the doorbell. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. Karen's silhouette behind the frosted glass was unmistakable, sharp as the edge of a knife, poised to carve chaos from calm. The envelope she handed me was as thin and rigid as her smile. Inside, a letter from the HOA detailing a list of new rules, each more absurd than the last. No decorative plants taller than 3 feet, no garden gnomes, and, most pointedly, no boats on driveways overnight. Her war on my boat had escalated to legislative proportions. In an instant, my driveway transformed from a peaceful harbor into a battlefield. Each citation she penned was a salvo, each rule an attempt to sink my spirits. But I knew her tactics. The HOA was her kingdom, and like any tyrant, she wielded power not with fairness, but with favoritism. Rumors dripped from her lips like poison, seeping into the neighborhood's consciousness. I could feel it when neighbors passed by, their furtive glances filled with the weight of whispered half-truths. My boat, once a symbol of freedom, now stood as a silent pariah in the community's eyes. They said it was an eyesore. Some claimed it blocked the view. Others, that it drew riffraff. But I knew it was Karen's narrative taking root in their minds, planting seeds of discord that only she could harvest. She relished the gossip, tended it as carefully as any gardener would their roses, the thorns always hidden beneath the bloom. I watched from my window as the street became a stage for her theater of control. She patrolled like a queen, inspecting her dominion, her gaze combing over yards and driveways, hunting for infractions as if they were offensive weeds in her well-manicured garden. Her clipboard became her scepter, a tool of her order, tapping out judgments with the inevitability of a metronome. Yet, there was a sense of irony in her reign. For all her dominance, it was a brittle kind of power, reliant on compliance and conformity, a single act of defiance, like a stone tossed into a still pond, could ripple through her world, and I was ready with my stone. The fishing club, her pride and joy, thrived on communal waters. The irony was delicious. She, who sought to control so much, owed her happiness to a freedom she denied others. As I sipped my coffee, a plan unfurled within my mind, quiet and unassuming, much like the fog that rolls in over the sea at dawn, obscuring and revealing in equal measure. I would dismantle her kingdom, not with force, but with its own rules, a precise legal strike, surgical and irrevocable. Her fishing club operated in a gray area, where licenses were more suggestion than mandate. I would bring light to that shadow, expose the loopholes she navigated with the same deftness I once did the open sea. The doorbell rang again, an echo of the earlier disturbance. But this time I ignored it. Karen was relentless, but so was the tide, and just like the sea, I knew when to retreat, when to advance. The envelope lay forgotten on the table as I stepped outside, the sun warm on my face. I looked at my boat, steadfast and patient. Yes, the battle lines were drawn, but the war was far from over. Let Karen have her rumors and rules. I had truth and time, and the tide was turning. In the quiet solitude of my backyard, I watched the sun dip below the horizon, fingers of waning light stretching across the sky. The water was calm, its surface a mirror reflecting the encroaching darkness, and my boat rocked gently in its slip, blissfully unaware of the tumult that had been brewing on shore. The HOA had been relentless, like a pack of wolves circling their prey. Karen, with her unyielding smile and clipboard of regulations, had become a fixture in my nightmares. Her voice, crisp and insistent, invaded my thoughts like a persistent mosquito. Their war was not with me. Not really. It was with the idea of my boat, the symbol of nonconformity it represented, a breach in their pristine, cookie-cutter world. They had declared it an eyesore, a blight upon the manicured uniformity of our neighborhood. Ironic, considering the irony was lost on them, their fishing club anointed with its own set of bylaws, evasive of the very regulations they wielded like a sword, was, to them, a bastion of community spirit. But hypocrisy, like oil on water, always rises to the surface. I had become a collector of their contradictions, each encounter, each letter, meticulously documented and stored, a silent arsenal. Their club meetings, always shrouded in a veil of exclusivity, unfolded like clandestine gatherings. They saw camaraderie. I saw an opportunity. The irony was delicious. Their fishing club, a secret sanctuary where rules were bent, sometimes broken, as easily as the rods they cast into the lake. They reveled in their little escapades, forgetting that their indiscretions could be as fishy as the tales they spun. Invisible in their midst, I gathered evidence, photos, recordings, notes, each a tiny rebellion against their tyranny. My counterattack was subtle, a chess game of patience and precision. They watched my boat. I watched their hypocrisy. Then the moment arrived. Like the first crack of thunder before a storm, I prepared my case with the care of an artist crafting a masterpiece, knowing that the reveal would be as satisfying as the act itself. My hand trembled slightly as I sealed the envelope. Inside, a compilation of their own misdeeds, a mirror held up to their self-righteous faces. I slipped it into the mailbox addressed to the state regulatory agency. A simple act of release, a pebble cast into still waters with ripples yet to come. The silence of anticipation settled around me like a familiar coat. I waited, watching as the world continued its dance around the sun, knowing the tide had turned. Weeks passed. The fishing club's chatter ebbed and flowed, unaware of the unseen tide pulling them toward an inevitable reckoning. When the investigation unfolded, it was not with a bang, but with a slow, deliberate unraveling. Their confidence faltered, their unity frayed. I watched with the detached calm of an observer, recognizing the inevitability of their collapse. The official notice arrived with less fanfare than anticipated, the language clinical and detached. The fishing club was suspended pending review. Their gathering ceased, leaving a void filled with whispered recriminations and the weight of consequence. And Karen, the fervent crusader, found herself silenced, her voice lost in the tumult she had unwittingly orchestrated. It was over. The irony of their downfall was as rich as it was bittersweet. In the end, my boat remained tethered to the dock, a quiet testament to resilience, bobbing gently against the ebb and flow of the tides. The water, ever patient, continued its dance under the vast, indifferent sky, carrying with it the echoes of a battle fought and won. I stood on the shore, the wind carrying away the remnants of conflict, and breathed in the salty air. The horizon stretched before me, limitless and inviting, as the world turned once more. The air felt different. A kind of charged anticipation rippled through the neighborhood. Like a storm looming just beyond the horizon, whispers fluttered from porch to porch, carried on the breeze like the dry leaves that skittered across the sidewalks. Eyes flicked towards my driveway, where my boat, now a symbol of quiet rebellion, was parked defiantly. The HOA's once pristine reputation had been tarnished, the gleam lost beneath the shadow of its own pettiness. A few neighbors began to see the cracks in its facade, like hairline fractures in porcelain. I could feel their curiosity, their uncertainty. It was a subtle awakening, like the first light of dawn creeping into a darkened room. Tension hummed in the air, a silent symphony of discontent. The fishing club meetings halted abruptly, leaving a void where the sound of laughter and the scent of fresh-caught fish used to linger. Now, only the echoes of past gatherings haunted the clubhouse, mingling with the dust motes that danced in the sunlight streaming through the high windows. I observed the shifts with a quiet satisfaction, like watching a chessboard where the pieces began to move in my favor. The irony of it all was not lost on me. The very rules they wielded like a weapon had turned back on them, a serpent consuming its own tail. The chairwoman, our neighborhood's very own Karen, seemed to sense the change in the wind. Her usual brisk stride across the sidewalks had slowed, her eyes darting side to side, measuring the distance between herself and the whispers. There was a new hesitance in her step, a crack in her once unassailable confidence. I felt no need to gloat. This was a war of attrition, not of conquest. It was enough to watch the seeds I'd planted take root, to see the blooms of dissent spread quietly among the hedgerows and flower beds of our suburban battlefield. As days passed, the whispers grew bolder, swelling into conversations hushed but fervent. Neighbors lingered longer over their fences, their voices low, but no longer silenced by fear of retribution. I moved among them like a ghost, part of the scene, yet apart from it, watching the slow unraveling of the HOA's tightly knit fabric. A ripple of surprise passed through the community when the HOA announced a sudden meeting, the agenda vague but pressing. The tone was different this time. Less authoritative edict and more a plea for unity. The undercurrent of desperation was palpable, like the scent of rain on dry earth. I attended, blending into the back rows. Where shadows cast by the flickering fluorescence formed a protective veil, Karen addressed the gathering, her voice steady, but lacking its usual edge. Her eyes flickered briefly to where I stood, an acknowledgement of sorts, or perhaps a challenge. Her words washed over the room, trying to stitch together what had begun to unravel, but the thread was frayed, and the needle dull. The irony was exquisite. Once, she had wielded the power of the HOA like a scepter, but now it seemed more akin to a crutch. The meeting ended without ceremony, the attendees dispersing into the night, their murmurs a soft undercurrent beneath the street lamp's glow. I lingered a moment, watching Karen's shoulders slump as the crowd thinned, her silhouette outlined against the dim light of the exit sign. In the quiet aftermath, I felt a sense of closure, not in victory, but in the delicate balance restored. The war was not over, but the tide had turned, and sometimes the most profound changes come not from sweeping gestures, but from the quiet resolve to stand one's ground. The morning sun filtered through my window, casting a warm glow over the stack of legal documents fanned out on my kitchen table. Each one was a testament to the meticulous planning and quiet resolve that had brought me to this point. The irony of it all was not lost on me. An HOA that had once been my adversary, now poised on the brink of collapse, not with a bang, but a whimper. The papers were a convoluted tapestry of legalese, but they told a simple story: non-compliance, mismanagement, negligence. Each word was a chisel against the stone facade of the HOA's imperious reign. I had discovered, through patient digging and quiet conversations, that their beloved fishing club never had the proper permits. A simple oversight, but one with profound implications. I sipped my coffee, its bitterness a stark contrast to the sweetness of vindication. There was a certain poetry to using their own rules against them. All those meetings I'd sat through, the endless lists of bylaws and regulations they'd become a noose of their own tying. The HOA had been relentless, waging a petty war against my boat, a harmless vessel that bobbed gently at the dock, a symbol of freedom they could not control. They'd cited obscure regulations, filed complaints, even threatened fines. Yet, here I was, turning their weaponry back on them. Outside, the lake shimmered serenely, unaware of the bureaucratic storm brewing just beneath its surface. The fishing club's members, clad in their identical vests, would soon converge for their weekly meeting. Unbeknownst to them, this would be the last. I allowed myself a moment of reflection. It was never about the boat. It was about principle, about standing firm against those who wield power without accountability. The HOA had overstepped, and now they would learn the cost of their hubris. The plan was simple. I had sent the documents anonymously to the county authorities. I imagined the confusion, the scrambling. It was always the quiet ones they underestimated. The clock ticked steadily, each second bringing me closer to the climax I had orchestrated. I could almost hear the distant murmur of indignant voices rising up from the lake, confusion etched on every face. The irony was delicious. I stepped outside, the crisp air a refreshing embrace. From my vantage point, I could see the gathering at the docks. The fishing club leader, a portly man with a permanent scowl, gestured wildly. Papers fluttered in the wind. One by one, the members began to disperse, their retreat a poignant ballet of defeat. As they trudged back to their homes, I felt a strange mix of triumph and melancholy. The war was over. A battle of wills fought with quiet determination rather than fiery confrontation, a testament to the power of patience, knowledge, and a little bit of irony. In the coming weeks, the HOA would crumble under the weight of its own pretensions, committees would disband, and rules would be rewritten. My boat, once a point of contention, now symbolized change. I returned inside, the echo of their retreat fading into the distance. The sun had climbed higher, bathing the room in a hopeful light. A new chapter awaited. The lake was once again mine to enjoy, a refuge of peace in a world often obsessed with control. And as for the HOA, well, I had declared my own kind of war, a war waged in silence, and one with the soft rustle of paper. The sun cast long shadows across the lake, where the water shimmered like liquid gold, a stark contrast to the mood that had been festering in our neighborhood. The air felt different today, lighter somehow, as if the universe had taken a deep breath and decided to exhale. I stood at the edge of my dock, the wooden planks creaking gently beneath my feet. My boat bobbed lazily in its spot, undisturbed by the recent turmoil. It had stood as a silent sentinel through the madness, a testament to resilience and the quiet stubbornness of inanimate things. Across the lake, the clubhouse looked empty, almost desolate. The fishing club had been the heart of the HOA's social life, a bustling hub of activity and chatter. Now, it was merely a shell of its former self, its vitality siphoned away by the very people who had once pledged to uphold its purpose. Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA, had found herself tangled in her web of control and deceit. Her kingdom crumbled under the weight of her ambition, her subjects growing weary of her reign. The fishing club had been her crown jewel, until it wasn't. I reflected on the irony. The very rules she had brandished like a sword to cut down my rightful ownership of my boat had become her undoing. Perhaps the universe had a sense of humor after all. The community, once a battleground, began to heal in the silence that followed her fall from grace. Neighbors who had been divided by her whims found common ground again, their smiles and nods a balm to the wounds inflicted by her tyranny. There was a sense of quiet camaraderie, a shared relief that lingered in the air, like the sweet scent of honeysuckle in late summer. Karen's influence had waned, her protests now little more than distant echoes. She was still there, of course, hovering at the periphery like a storm reluctant to fully dissipate, but she was sidelined. Her voice had lost its power, no longer the thunderous decree it once was. I felt a strange kind of peace, a satisfaction that was less about victory and more about restoration. It wasn't about revenge. It was about balance. The community was recalibrating, finding its rhythm again. And in that harmony, there was solace. As I watched the sun dip lower, painting the sky with a palette of oranges and purples, I thought about the future, the lake, the land, the lives intertwined within this neighborhood. They all deserved more than the petty whims of a single person. They deserved stewardship, not tyranny. A light breeze ruffled the surface of the water, sending ripples spreading outward. I saw it as a metaphor, a reminder that actions, no matter how small, have far-reaching effects, and just as the lake absorbed the ripples, so too would the community absorb the lessons learned from the saga. I turned away from the water, a smile tugging at my lips. The war was over, the boat vindicated, and the fishing club's demise a cautionary tale etched into the annals of our HOA's history. In the end, justice had not been served through confrontation, but through the quiet resilience of a community tired of conflict. As I walked back to my house, the weight of the past weeks lifted. I felt a kinship with the lake, enduring, unwavering, and patient. And like the lake, I would remain quietly powerful, a calm presence amidst the chaos, ready to reflect the world as it should be, undisturbed by the ripples of discord.